I'm going to talk about getting started with clay today. One of the first things I would suggest is you go get a smock or an apron to protect your clothes. Clay will wash out, but it doesn't look very pretty for the rest of the day. So I would wear a smock. You're going to take a table cover that are available in the back of the classroom to cover your table surface so we don't have to get clay on top of them and scrub them but so much. So this is a table cover, and this gives me a setup of things I need. What is clay? Clay is basically a purified type of mud. It's specific, it has silica in it, and when it fires it has enough silica in it that it changes its molecular composition. We have to raise it to about 1600 degrees. It hardens, it becomes more like a rock. It does not dissolve anymore. Right now our clay is very wet. You each have a bag, plastic bag. Keep a hold of that, you're going to need it every day, and a rag around a little wad of clay that I've provided for you. This is very plastic. We can mold and shape it. As it dries, it's going to be harder, it's going to be more brittle. Think of clay kind of like the stuff that gets in your shoes when you go outside. If you get in your tennis shoes, you get a little piece of dirt in there. It sticks to the shoe for a while. When it dries out, it becomes very brittle. It can shatter when you step on it, make a big mess. But if you get it wet again, it will dissolve and turn back into a dirt mud piece. So clay is basically just purified mud. It is never trash until it's been fired. So even if there's little itty bitty pieces, please save them and we'll use them again. But this is clay. It's first thing we need to do is wedge our clay. Wedging is to compress clay, to compact it. So why do we wedge clay? To remove air bubbles. If you have an air bubble in your piece and it's inside that wall of clay and it's in the kiln, it gets very hot, pressure builds up, and sometimes it can break your piece. It pops underneath that pressure. You can't tell there's an air bubble in it while you're building it, so we have to kind of preventatively get rid of them. You want to make even moisture consistency on your clay. We want to have a nice even amount of moisture in it. I've pre-packed these up. This piece is in really good shape. But if you get some new clay out of the bin that's been re-soaked, it might be really wet in some spots and harder in others. But we want to get an even moisture consistency, so when you press on it or you push it, it responds the same amount. And then you want to you can also add or remove small amounts of moisture. This clay is in really good shape. If I touch it, it makes my hand dirty, but it doesn't really stick to it. This is in perfect working condition. If the clay is really wet like this, it's going to stick to your hands, and that's not going to build with very well. But you can wedge or do what we're doing now on top of something dry like a bat or a piece of dry fabric, and it will remove small amounts of moisture. If you want to dip your t-shirt in, a t-shirt rag in water and wedge it on top of it because it's starting to dry out, you can actually add a little bit of moisture to it. Not a lot, but enough. The biggest issue is we want to make sure those air bubbles are gone. So how do we wedge clay? All right, you're going to take and stand up, and you're going to take your hands and push. This is a small piece. A larger piece is a little harder to manipulate. Stack both my hands on top and push. Turn the clay and push. We're working it kind of in a cube. It doesn't have to be attractive. It doesn't need to be a beautiful cube. Patting it into a pretty little cube doesn't really help. You really need to lean into it and move that clay. You do not want to bend it over and fold it over on itself. If you do that, you're going to be adding air into it rather than removing it. So I'm taking and I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Just kind of keep the long side up. And what I'm going to do is I'm compressing this. Somehow it realigns the molecules in it. I was explained to one time. You want to do this for a few minutes. Sometimes it takes longer than others. If you're doing a large piece of clay, it's going to take a little more time. But once you do this for a couple of minutes, I would say do it at least 50 times before you look. You're going to get a piece of string or a wire. Here's a piece of string. I'm going to hold it like you might a piece of dental floss by wrapping around both fingers. And I'm going to hold the clay and I'm going to slide this string through twice. This is going to give me a cross section, so I can take a look at what's going on inside this clay. Now there we have a piece of clay that is fine. It's wedged. If you see a hole that looks like these little drag marks, kind of looks like a comet, it's probably the particles in here that are called grout that are just being pulled by the string. This looks like a clean piece of clay, and over here I have a problem. This is probably an air bubble or maybe a piece of, there's a piece of material in there. I'm going to take that out, throw that away. But this little air pocket right here could be a problematic situation. If I have one piece, one air pocket on my two slices, I'm going to assume there may be others. So what I need to do is I'm going to take this and I'm really going to slam it together hard, okay? And then I'm going to continue this process until when I cut it, it's clean. I don't want any air bubbles in there that could damage your piece later. Doing this seated doesn't seem to be as effective. It's not about your arm strength. It's really about kind of leaning into it. Alright. Did that for a few minutes. Let's cut it and see how it's doing again. Cut it once. Cut it twice. Alright, that looks okay. Here we have some of these little particles being pulled, but they're not really an air pocket. Looks okay in both of these places. So okay, my clay looks good. I'm going to be able to use this. I'm going to take it, I'm really going to smack it hard together so I'm going to wedge this back up into a cube. And if I'm ready to move on to the next step, I can. But if I need to just put my clay away, I need to do a few things. I'm going to take this rag. I want this to be moist but not drippy. I want it to add a little bit of moisture between classes, but I don't want it to be really wet. This is a little dry. I would go back and put just a little bit of water, maybe wring it out really tight, or just take a handful of water and sprinkle it on it. Put my clay inside of my rag. Put my bag with my name on it, okay? Name side up, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to close it up and put the weight of the bag holding the opening down. If I leave my bag out like this, the air is going to get to it and it's not going to work. So I want to be able to find my name side up, clay on top so the weight's down. Then we're going to store that in your class cabinet. Cleaning up. All right, you're going to return all your tools to the back. Take these little scraps of clay are not trash. I don't want them on the floor. It makes for a big mess. We don't want to waste the clay either. So you can take this and dump it into the wet clay bin. Then go back to the sink and wash your hands. Wash your hands last after you've gotten everything put away. There's a bucket inside the sink. Wash your hands over the bucket and then rinse them. The clay particles from your fingers will fall down into the bucket and not go down the drain. But this is important to take this and dump it over and just fold this in half and leave it for the next class.